This is Lemna Media. Today I'm going to be doing the first episode in a series of videos where I go over the basics and how to use different types of cinema cameras. This episode is going to be over the Canon C200. Canon C200 is currently listed on Canon's website for $3,499. It features an 8.85 megapixel Super 35mm CMOS sensor, and it uses the Canon EF mount. This camera features slow motion recording, pre-recording, frame recording, and interval recording. The camera allows for dual slot SD card recording. It also allows for external recording through HDMI or SDI output. It outputs to CFast or SD card. It outputs to the viewfinder, included screen, HDMI, and SDI. It has a network connection for use with Canon software. The different types of recording on this camera are RAW, MP4, MP4 proxy. The RAW video recording records with the Cinema RAW Lite codec. Its resolution is 4096 by 2160. Its bit depth is 10-bit at 60 FPS or 50, or 12-bit at 30, 24, and 25. Its bit rate is 1 GB per second. The audio recording is linear PCM at 16 bits, 48 kHz on 4 channels. The MP4 recording mode uses the MPEG-4 codec with AVC or H.264. The resolution is 3840 by 2160 or 1920 by 1080. Its bitrate is 150 megabytes per second at 3840 by 2160 or 35 megabytes per second at 1920 by 1080. Its color sampling is YCC 428-bit. The audio on MP4 recording is MPEG-4 AAC-LC at 16-bit 48 kHz in 2 channels, or linear PCM at 16-bit 48 kHz in 4 channels. The MP4 proxy records at a resolution of 2048 by 1080 at a bitrate of 35 megabits per second. The color sampling is YCC 428-bit, and the audio is the same as the regular MP4 recording. We're now going to go over the function buttons available on this camera. We're going to start off by going over to this left side here, which has the main section of buttons. Number 1 is the magnify button, but when you press this it'll zoom in on your frame. Number 2 is the peaking button. This will show your focus peaking. Number 3 is zebra. That'll show your exposure peaking and shadow peaking. WFM shows a waveform on your screen to show different levels of light. ISO/gain button, that is what you'll press in order to change your ISO/gain. Shutter button, as the name implies, that'll let you change your shutter speed. And then number 7 is display. That'll show different overlays on the screen. Over here to the left of that, we have the ND filter buttons. This camera does have 6 stops of built-in ND. Down here, we have this little dial. That'll allow you to change your f-stop. And above that, we have the slot to open the CFast card. Moving to the back is where we have some more controls. Here, the function 8 button, that can be reprogrammed to be different things. Right now I have it set to just cycle through the different things on screen. Below that we have a knob, that's how you'll change the different settings on the screen. A cancel button and a menu button. And then you have your little audio panel here. Audio status, if you click on that, will open up a little menu that shows all of the different audio inputs, all 4 channels, as well as your headphone volume. Underneath that, you have dials that'll allow you to change your gain and sensitivity. That can be set to auto or manual. Over to the right of that, we have the SD card slots. You have an A and a B, and these flaps just open up upwards. And in order to switch between, when you have cards in them, you'll hit the slot select button. Below that, we have the battery with an easy release. To release it, you simply press the button and slide the battery to the right. And then it will come out, and the same thing, insert it at the right side and press in and slide to the left. Moving on to this side, we have more inputs and outputs. So here we have input number 2 for audio. This is an XLR input. Underneath that, we have our SDI output. Underneath that, we have headphones and USB. Below that is the network port for use with that Canon software mentioned earlier. And underneath that, we have a DC in for if you want to record using DC power. Even further to the side, we have input number 1 for XLR. And then we also have little input selects to be able to decide if you want analog or AES, or if you want to use the line, mic, or mic 48 volt. Underneath that, we have the input 2 controls. And then way down here in the corner is a slot for remote or HDMI. Canon C200 does come with a built-in screen. This screen is where you'll do all of your menu controls. If we flip it on using the switch over here, we can see once we flip it on, we can see the menu here. We have a couple more function buttons on the screen itself. We have function 1 and display. Function 1 does the same thing, at least I have it set to do the same thing as it does on the back, and it just cycles through those menu options. Display will of course show the different things on the screen, the same as the display button on the camera body. The camera also features a built-in hand grip. This only has a couple buttons on it. It has your front recording button, a little dial here that'll control your f-stop, and then a focus guide button. By pressing that, it'll show a little focus help that'll help you be able to manually focus quicker. Up here on the front of the camera, we do have two more buttons, a push auto iris and a one-shot autofocus. Now I'm going to go over the workflow that you can kind of expect from the footage coming out of the C200. I personally like to color grade in DaVinci Resolve, so that's what I'm going to be using here. So we're going to go into DaVinci Resolve here. So I take the footage here, cut it up, edit it, whatever you need to do. Now I'm going to move on over to the color space. Here in the color tab, I'm going to be looking at the footage we got here. I'm going to create a couple of new things. Create a couple of these. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of these. Then I like to use Color Space Transform to convert it from the raw gamma to Rec 709. So first we're going to do the input color space. That is going to be under the Canon Cinema Gamut. The input gamma is what you'll choose in the camera. I chose Canon Log 3, sorry. I chose Canon Log 3 because that one I've had the best experience with. The output color space, you're going to put it to Rec 709 or whatever color space you want to work in. Now that we've got this is kind of how it looks out of the camera without any other color grading. I think it honestly looks pretty good. In some cases it might be a bit more saturated than you like, and of course, depending on the mood that you're going for with your film, you're going to want to change it differently. I'm going to do some simple corrections here, but I have found that the video coming straight out of the Canon C200 after being converted has really good color, really good exposure, good contrast, everything. I have found that the saturation tends to be a little bit higher than I personally like, but of course, color grading is going to be based on what you're making and kind of a personal preference thing. In terms of camera quality, this is using the lens that came with the camera as a kit. There's very little chromatic aberration. In terms of vignetting, there's very little. But of course, that can be corrected in camera as well using one of the settings in the menu. Overall, I think the C200 is a fantastic camera, and you get great visuals straight out of camera with very little work. Personally, I have found that it's relatively easy to use. While the menus can be a bit annoying because of how many there are, it has fantastic controls and lets you really control many aspects of the camera. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.